What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Tesla stock, ticker symbol TSLA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Wednesday, May 22nd. All right, guys, Tesla stock here catching a little bit of a pop, up $11.65 per share in regular trading hours. It's plus 6.66%. It is down here a little bit after hours. Listen, guys, you guys know how I feel about after hours. If volume is very low, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And typically with after hours, volume is really only matching intraday, at least for a period of time. On big news releases, usually it's going to be something like earnings. So take that with a grain of salt wherever it may end up here tonight. But let's take a look and get the best possible feel that we can for Tesla heading into tomorrow. We're going to look at the volume profile, get directional bias from there. We'll look at the psychological levels that everyone's watching, the institutions especially, so we need to be paying attention as well and be aware of those. We'll look at implied volatility, the expected move for tomorrow, and the directional bias from the chain, okay, being priced in there for tomorrow. Now, a little bit of news here today on Tesla. Of course, we got news that the Tesla Semi is remaining on track for production spec deliveries to customers by 2026. Okay, and on top of that, we also got a reiteration from Morgan Stanley of an overweight rating, which is never a bad thing. So and that came, at least start hitting news around midday. So let's get started here with the volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. And we're going to have some moves to look at here. Of course, a more volatile day here for the name on some news. So what we're really doing here is taking a look under the hood and saying, okay, it was a big green day for Tesla. Bulls, you guys would clearly, the price action's done. Right, so here we're looking for confirmation or something that doesn't necessarily agree. So bulls, what are you really looking for in the volume profile? Well, you're clearly looking for bullish bias to confirm or at least support the move that we saw today. I mean, it's nearly a 7% green day. Whereas bulls, you can't really go into this expecting some massive bearish volume, right? So what's the next best thing is a profile that doesn't really support the upside with no bias really whatsoever is what you guys are looking for. So off the open, high volume open, we expect that it fades quickly. Okay, we get a few pops. There's nothing there that we can pull out. As we move through the morning, here, we get 3 out of context green bars in terms of volume compared to what is typically expected at that time of day. After that move is made, and the stock starts to consolidate a little bit, volume quickly fades off. That's bullish bias. Okay, it's not ridiculous, it's not tremendous, but it's there. And as we move through kind of the mid-afternoon, we start to see, again, a very small amount here with just a couple of bars, but that is there. Okay, it's out of context, it's higher, much higher volume than normal, and then it fades off pretty quickly as that red bar hits. We move through. This here starts to get a little bit murky. Okay, we have kind of a mixed bag. This here, I'm uncomfortable assigning any bias to, but then heading into the close, guys, we start to see an increase in volume slightly, a little more premature than what we might see on any typical day. It's not uncommon to see like just the second to last bar increasing on Tesla. That's something we've been seeing quite a bit recently across a lot of stocks. We're not really getting that contextual pickup in volume like through the last 20 minutes to half hour of the trading day. But today on Tesla, we started to get that a little earlier than normal. And, you know, we're seeing, what is that, 6 consecutive green bars into the bell. And then we get a 7th. That bar immediately after the close is going to be a rebalancing bar. Okay, so we're kind of ignoring that bigger bar there. And what that tells me is a slight amount of bullish bias as well heading into the close, not only due to the consecutive bars, but also the slightly higher out of context volume a little earlier, maybe on that, you know, 3rd bar out, 2nd bar out into the close. So, you know, honestly, guys, there's a bit of bullish bias here, but it's not as ridiculous as you might hope to see on a 6-7% green day. But there is certainly some there. So bears, you know, it's not like you really got away with nothing here. But bulls, you know, it wasn't ridiculous, it wasn't tremendous, but as I always say, you know, it's a 6-7% green day. It's kind of hard to argue that the bulls didn't win today, especially when you get at least a little bit of supporting bias in the underlying volume profile. So let's move on here and take a look at the psychological self-fulfilling prophecy levels that are going to get shaken up here today. These are the levels that everyone's kind of paying attention to. I pull out It didn't take much designing, but I suppose I originally started looking at the charts and kind of quote unquote designing them. Again, didn't take very much to really gear myself toward what has the biggest sample size of eyeballs. I'm only interested in the psychology. So I do the 30-minute, the 4-hour, and the daily, each with the 50 period, the white line, and the 200 period, the gray line. Now here today on the 30-minute, remember yesterday we had given up the 50 period and we were holding the 200. So today we were looking ideally to reclaim both. Well, we came into the open, I suppose, below both. We opened just below the 50 period, and then we ripped higher. We tested downside the 200, a little sloppy off the volatile open, and we pushed higher on big volume and continue to, of course, push higher throughout the day. So we now find ourselves a pretty large margin. We're about 3.7% away from the current 50 period. Understand that tomorrow it's not unlikely that the 50 period and even the 200 period are moving up, kind of starting to close that I guess I'll call it a little bit of a gap, not in the traditional sense, but I'll call it a little bit of an opening here. That's likely to close up a little bit, especially from that 50 period heading into tomorrow. But bulls, what I'm really watching, I don't want to give up either of these. We just put a lot of distance in between. What I really want, ideally from a bullish perspective, is the 50 period to get as high as possible, as quickly as possible, see a retest out of the stock, and then bounce away from the 50, confirming it as support. Because today, all we really did was break and rip. We still haven't really retested it, and I'm a fan of confirmation because you guys know that there's a lot of bears out there right now looking at the same chart because, again, we designed this intentionally for the most amount of eyeballs, and they're looking at this and saying, we just kind of ripped and ran. We never really confirmed anything. Who's to say this won't just break back downside the second day after the news? So bulls, I want to see a retest of the 50 period as it comes higher and higher, and then a bounce on high volume. Bears, ideally breaking downside at least through the 50 period and reclaiming that as resistance, doing so ripping down on high volume, retesting on low volume, and then rejecting off the 50 period, again, as this 50 period likely comes higher. That would reclaim that at least to the 50 as resistance and potentially set you guys up for a near-term test of the 200 period on the 30 as it comes higher. Now, let's look at the 4-hour. I'm sure this one will be quick. Now, guys, the 4-hour moves slower. Okay, like the 50 period and the 200 period, they move slower. It's a longer time frame chart, right? So understand that it's currently about a 5.5% move away from the 50 period, and that 50 period is not likely to rip super high very quickly, right? So if it comes back into play, of course, I'm watching it as a level of very high interest. But until then, what I'm really looking at from a bullish perspective is I just want to see the 50 period curling upside and reclaiming as many whole dollars as possible, because I like to see these levels get up under the move to create a psychological, or at least as many as possible, psychological backstops, at least potential backstops, up under the recent move as possible. All right, now the daily, this is the most important chart. You can see here that after today's close, we have now created some separation from that 50-day moving average, 8.4%. Okay, so that is not the immediate concern anymore. What's the immediate story here on Tesla? Well, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, approximately we're maybe less than 2%, 1.8, 1.9% away from 190. If I'm a bull, I'm looking at this chart and thinking, well, every $10 increment on Tesla is a psychological level. We know that. 200 is, of course, the biggest one in the current range. So if we can reclaim 190, that's reclaiming an additional psychological level, claim it as support, and then in the future, we can look to use 190 as a trampoline to push up toward 200, which is kind of like the ultimate goal, right? At least in the midterm. So bulls, tomorrow, a break and hold of 190, claiming that as support is beautiful. Bears, any test of 190, you're going to want to see that reject. And then if you look here, at least approximately, down to 180, you're looking at about 3.5%. So maybe if you could just hold off 190, get below 185, and then like best case scenario, you get down below 180. That's what I'd be looking for as a bear. Implied volatility. It's on the rise here today. Okay, now compared to the last week, IV is high. Compared to the last month, IV is, I would say, in like the mid-range. Okay, because you look at the last 30 days or so, it's kind of in the average area. Maybe a little low, but more like the mid-range. But in comparison to the last 3 months, I would say it's in the mid to low range. Okay, obviously very important to know, especially if you're buying calls or puts. It's really important to know where you stand in terms of what you're paying up for Vega value and what your potential risk of IV crush or potential benefit of some IV pump in the future might be. So it's important to know where that stands in relation to your intended trade time frame. Now, expected move on Tesla. Of course, we have weekly expirations on Tesla, so we have to do a little bit of educated guesswork. Now, of course, we don't have any earnings or anything coming from between now and Friday. So Friday's expiration, the expected move by Friday's close compared to today's close is currently being priced in at plus or minus $7.60 per share. So here's what we can do. We divide that by 3 trading days left, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? And then we add back 50% to make up for the fact that the initial calculation assumes all green days or all red days. That gives us an expected move by tomorrow's close, Wednesday's close, compared to today's close of about $3.80 per share. Okay, now, again, by design, no directional bias baked in there. That is this. We're looking at a different thing right now. That's the volatility expectation, which is important to be aware of what the market expects. Because if you have a strong directional bias and a bias in terms of volatility being higher or lower than what the market expects, that could be a strong position for you. But you're probably thinking, okay, well, directional bias though, what about it? Let's look at the volume. 2.47 million contracts traded today. Of those, we have about 1.49 million calls, 977,000 puts. So we're seeing a call side bias today. And if we break that down by the short-term speculators in the 0 to 20 delta range, we're seeing 589,000 calls, 379,000 puts. So again, bullish bias not only out of the short-term speculators, also on the overall call put ratio here on Tesla today. Listen, guys, if you get value out of these daily Tesla videos, I try to pack them with as much information as possible to, get you out of here quickly and I think get you as prepped as we possibly can for tomorrow's trading day. This is what I do every day and have been doing for years now on every stock that I'm interested in or looking at. So I'm kind of like taking you along for the ride each day on Tesla because I'd be doing this anyway. Hey, I appreciate you leaving a like on the video. Listen, that's the easiest thing you can do and the best thing you can do for the channel, helping to grow the channel. And I greatly appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one.